Hello, my name is Luis Velasquez. The paintings of Peter Paul Rubens continue to inspire painters today as they have throughout the centuries since his death in 1640. In September 2010, I posted my proposal on my website that Rubens used pine tree tar resin as the golden brown colorant seen in the monotone of his finest paintings. This DVD serves to document this proposal through the published scientific studies as well as live demonstrations of my own study, studio testing, and application of the ancient resin material. I hope today's modern artists will find this DVD to be of helpful value in better understanding how the marvelous paintings of Peter Paul Rubens were constructed and painted. My books and DVDs on oil painting with calcite sun oil and on CSO egg tempera painting are available on online bookstores. Peter Paul Rubens was a brilliant painter. He was born in Flanders and studied the Flemish method of Van Eyck. Later in Italy, he lived for 9 years and studied the Venetian method of Titian. He combined both methods and developed his own brilliant method. We see his use of a golden glowing brown color in the monotone of his finest paintings. I have proposed it is pine tree tar resin. Calcium carbonate chalk from Champagne, France is the finest. Chalk is a stabilizer that prevents the pine tree tar resin from dripping. The more chalk that is added causes the pine tree tar resin to dry, matte, and opaque. This is not a problem, as a subsequent oil out with sun oil restores the deep golden brown color and luster of the pine tree tar resin. This is flax oil. See the horizontal lines on the backboard. Uncleansed oil is full of mucilage and opaque. Once the mucilage is removed, the oil is clear and transparent. The next film sequence will confirm what the old masters knew. The finest oil for oil painting is a mucilage-free, cleansed, sun-thickened flax oil. The oil in the jar appears yellow, but the jar is 4 inches thick, and the yellow color is seen in concentrated form. When used in oil painting, the oil is spread out very thinly. Here is the proof that it is colorless and crystal clear. Rubens and the other old masters knew, as did the scientists from the 20th century, that flax linseed oil will bleach crystal clear on exposure to sunlight, even indirect sunlight in a room. The yellow color of flax oil is normal and caused by its fatty acids. These important fatty acids should never be removed. They are important so the oil remains flexible and durable and will last over 600 years, as proven by the paintings of the Van Eycks. In the first photo, you see the mucilage at the bottom of the jar. Mucilage is a microscopic ingredient that just fills the oil. When trapped together, it is snow white in color. In the next 3 photographs, you will see how over the space of 12 months, the mucilage became darker and darker as the oil bleached out clearer and clearer. In the last photograph, you will see a very large bubble that is crystal clear, and the bubble is extremely thin. It is important to use cleansed oil in oil painting. Use of uncleansed oil will cause the colors to become brown over time. The next sequence of film is important to artists and to manufacturers of the oils artists use, as well as to scientists and conservators of oil paintings. The film graphically shows the damage caused by use of uncleansed oil in oil paintings. My handwriting on the jar records the date of the test, January, February of 2008. 45 days gravity to drop the mucilage on a bed of water called a water sediment trap. Water is polar and attracts the mucilage downwards. Frozen and decanted on 2/18 of 08. In the next sequence, I will narrate the process of using Rubens's methods. On my painting of Maria Elena, my daughter, I'm going to make a tracing outline of just the major lines. Here's the finished drawing. On the back, I'm going to use charcoal so that I can do a transfer. I'm using natural charcoal, which is called vine charcoal. It's a very soft gray charcoal used since ancient times. I'm putting this on behind the drawing, and I'll rub it down a little bit before I turn it over and do the transfer. So the charcoal goes up against the board, and now with the end of the brush I'm going to outline the major lines and also do some shading. Once this is done, I can use the charcoal and make some of the major lines a little bit easier to see. Another method would be to use some ink and to outline it with ink, waterproof in the ink. Now I'm going to blend some of this down a little bit. Fat-free milk. Don't use low fat and don't use whole milk. Fat-free milk is pure casein. If you use the wide brush, you have to apply it very gently. It will smear the charcoal. If you use a very narrow brush, it will also smear. It's like watercolor painting. I devised a method. I'm using a cotton t-shirt that I pre-moistened with non-fat milk. I place it on the drawing, and now with non-fat milk I'm just going to brush it around. This doesn't smear the drawing at all. You have to remove the cloth immediately. You don't want it to dry. Place it out in the sun. Milk is mostly water. Once the water evaporates, rub over the drawing to get off any excess charcoal. Once the milk is dried, I can start to apply the mixture of pine tree tar resin, which I will show you later how to mix together. Basically, I will be working on outline as well as shading. Later on, I will be finishing this painting in color. Please note that I did not use an oil out and that I am using a stiff brush. It's very easy to make the spirit varnish. The balsam is very sticky. You add turpentine to it, and then you mix it together. You don't have to heat this. You just have to rub them together as the balsam will dissolve in the turpentine. Rubens used this mixture to create a very tacky paint that would allow him to paint with Thixoptropic. I'll explain that later. On the grinding table you can see several things that Rubens used. I have the spirit varnish mixed in that jar. I have several dry pigments, red, yellow, blue, and white. And close up I have the aguado, which is a thin mixture of chalk and oil. And I have the casein, which is thicker. I placed some of the spirit varnish with the dry pigment, and I'm going to grind it into a thick paste. It can't be loose, it has to be thick, so you'll see I keep drawing the dry pigment into it and grinding it together. So you mix it together until it's a thick paste. As we do this, the turpentine begins to evaporate, and it starts to create a very sticky paint because of that balsam that's there. Now Rubens would mix this. He would then add a mixture of oil and chalk, which is similar to calcite sun oil, my creation of mixing oil and chalk, sun-thickened oil and chalk. This makes a very lustrous paint, and once again the solvent continues to evaporate. In the next sequence I'll show you how to make calcite sun oil. You must measure this because you won't believe how it'll mix. Get 1 spoonful of the sun-thickened oil and 3 compacted spoonfuls of the chalk. The first step is to mix. So you want to mix this. Do not add more oil. Just get it all mixed together. It takes a little bit of time for it to get absorbed. Now once you get it mixed together, there is no more white chalk. Start to grind it. And it doesn't take long, just a couple of minutes as you grind this. But you must grind it well for a couple of minutes. Now it'll be thick and viscous. Now compared to the aguado, which is very thin, there in the foreground, you can see the difference. In the next sequence, you'll see how Rubens's paint becomes very sticky. The solvent, the turpentine, has evaporated, and you could not brush this paint unless if you added some oil and chalk. I'm using the aguado, not the calcite sun oil. I'd already mixed the calcite sun oil with the paint, but now I need to add some aguado to thin it even more. Do not use turpentine. In the next sequence, I'll show you how to make the aguado. It's a very loose, thin mixture, not thick like calcite sun oil. You can be a little more relaxed with this mixture. You don't have to measure as much or as closely. In my example, I made it just a little too loose. It could have had a little bit more chalk. If you don't add enough chalk, the sun oil will drip. So you have to experiment just a little bit. I've given you the formula at the beginning here, which will help. After the pine tree tar monotone is dried firmly and hard, you can apply the aguado as the oil out. I've rubbed it all over with my hand, making sure that it's all over the surface. Trying to spread it evenly. After I do that, I'm going to get a lint-free rag and I'm going to remove most of it. If I have too much oil on there, even though I have chalk mixed with it, it could cause some runs and some drips. I'm not doing this with a lot of force. I'm gently removing excess. Once I have applied the aguado oil out, I can begin to paint. The first application is rubbed in very thinly, allowing the imprimatura and the monotone to show through. Once I finish this, I start applying thicker paint that is more opaque in the highlights. I'm trying to get the values down, the lights and darks. I'm not worried about blending. I'm just trying to put where the lights will be. It takes time. You can slow down here. Once I have the patchwork done, then I clean my brush really well with a towel, and I use the very tips of the brush to do the blending. I'm going to repeat this again. Keep that rag in your hand and frequently remove the paint from it so it's a dry brush. The next day I photographed the same painting in bright sunlight. You can see the bright clear colors that the painting has. In the next demonstration, I'm rubbing calcium carbonate on the back of the drawing instead of black chalk. I'll use this to make the transfer onto the board. We do the same procedure. We use a hard pencil or the back end of a brush to make the transfer. Once I finish the transfer, I can use regular white chalk that children use in school, and I can complete the drawing freehand. The advantage of white chalk is it does not need to be fixed or sealed in any way. Cleanup is important. Dip a towel into the non-fat milk and begin to rub. Non-fat milk will even lift dried acrylic gesso, and here it removes it with a little bit of rubbing. It leaves it clean. You can also get your brushes and dip them, and after you do this a few times, make sure you wash the brushes out with soap and water and let them dry. Take the monotone painting outside in the sun, or keep it in a room that's very dry and warm. If you see any thick paint, rub over it, blend it in to help accelerate the drawing. Now I have my palette. There's my calcite sun oil, thick, and there's my aguado, thin. And I have tube paints. This time I'm not using the Rubens pre-mixed dry pigments. I'm using our tube paints. And it's easy to grind these together. You may notice I don't have my white there, but I added it later. So you grind equal amounts of the calcite sun oil with the tube paints. This creates a more flowing paint that is easy to manage, and the chalk and oil gives it greater control. We're almost ready to paint. Some colors require a little bit more calcite sun oil than others. You'll learn this by experience. Now I'm applying the aguado oil out. You can see it looks a little chalky, but that isn't a problem. I'm going to rub it in with my hand. You can't do this with a brush. Do it with your hand and rub it in firmly. Then get a clean towel and wipe it down. Once you get it thin enough, you won't even see that chalk that you saw there a minute ago. I begin with a thin rub-in. That'll go all over, but it's thin enough to where you can still see the imprimatura, that's ochre colored, and the brown monotone from the pine tree tar. I added now a lighter color, some of the white mixed with the Naples yellow. And now that I've got it pretty much laid out, I start to do some blending. I've added some red. I begin some darks. The calcite sun oil paint flows easily, but you do need a bristle brush. I've added some more details with the dark paint. I've added some blue in the shadows. And as I do some close-up, you can see the imprimatura and the golden brown from the pine tree tar. I noticed that I had not put in the eyelashes. I'll put them in later. Using Rubens' techniques of translucency and transparency, you can create some magic effects, allowing the layers to show through one through the other. The next demonstration uses denatured alcohol, which is a hazardous liquid. The fumes are very dangerous, and I do not recommend its use. The denatured alcohol and the chalk are mixed together in a small glass to make a creamy mixture. We then add enough pine tree tar resin to give the mixture some color. A jar with denatured alcohol can be used as a thinner as you paint. Here you see the actual color of the pine tree tar resin so that you may compare it with the color of the mixture, which is much lighter. A white chalk drawing was made and blended smooth. On this drawing, the mixture is painted and the chalk is absorbed. Do not add any oil to this mixture and do not apply an oil out to the board. You can thin the mixture with denatured alcohol. The pine tree tar resin has a very strong odor. I am painting this outdoors with plenty of ventilation. The fumes are dangerous from the denatured alcohol. As you paint, you can also scratch into the wet paint to help you as a guide. Once you're finished with the monotone painting, place it out in the sun or in a hot, dry room with plenty of ventilation. I have made the aguado, a thin mixture of sun oil and chalk. The chalk prevents the oil from dripping as you paint. Apply it with your hand all over the surface. Apply it thinly and evenly. After you do this, use a dry towel to wipe off all the excess. Leave a very thin film. For this demonstration, I'm using tube paints that are mixed with an equal amount of calcite sun oil. It's easy to grind them together. It takes seconds. I begin the painting with a very thin rubbing that is painted into the damp oil out. I'll add some color accent marks, and then I'll start to add some light colored skin tones. I do some blending, then I'll add some darks, black, and some details, as well as some background color. You can use your fingers to blend the paint. This was a technique used by many of the masters. The fingerprints of Da Vinci, Raphael, Titian have been found in their paint. The next series of still photographs show a very simple method of oil painting on top of tempera. In this case, I'm using the CSO casein tempera, which is discussed later in this same video. The tempera dries almost instantly, and once it does, I can do the oil out, and I can start applying the oil paints using calcite sun oil and oiling out with an aguado or the viscous emulsion. You can achieve the old master effects easily by using calcite sun oil. You can do extremely fine lines if you wish, details, and translucency of the color, and impasto. To make CSO casein tempera paint, you must use fat-free milk. Do not use low fat and do not use whole milk because the milk fat will not dry. You need a white vinegar, either rice or wine vinegar. You measure out 2 ounces of the vinegar to 20 ounces of the non-fat milk. Pour them together, stir them, and put the cap on and let it sit overnight. The next day you'll see that the curd has separated from the whey. The liquid is called whey. You use cheesecloth, which you can keep in a glass of water. Then what you do is you remove all the water and spread it out in the funnel. After you have the cheesecloth in the funnel, pour the curded milk into it. Unfortunately, I have a small funnel. I'm going to have to do this twice. You can see the whey and the vinegar water are dripping. You can either let it drip or you can go ahead and accelerate it by grabbing all 4 corners of the cheesecloth and squeezing gently to eliminate the liquid. You want the curd to be moist. You don't want it dried out. So go ahead and save some of the moisture in it. Get a nice clean jar and place it there. As I mentioned, I need to do this twice. There is the whey and the vinegar water. There's the curd and the remaining curded milk that I need to drain out. So I've repeated the process, and I'll do the same pressure to get the whey out, and then I'll collect all the curd in the jar, and I'll save my cheesecloth in a glass of water. Later you can wash this out and put it in a clean glass of water. Now you want to put a cap on this, and when you're not using it you want to keep it refrigerated. Put the date on it, After all, this is food, and foods don't last forever, not even in the refrigerator. I have some dry powders. I have my curd, calcium carbonate chalk, and milk, non-fat milk. These are the materials I need for painting with CSO casein tempera. I'm going to pour some of the milk in a small jar. It will be the thinner, the liquid thinner for the paint. I place some curd and some chalk on the palette, and I grind them together, equal amounts. This makes a paste. By mixing the mixture with colored dry pigment, I can create paint. This paint is archival and will last for 1,000 years. Using the non-fat milk, I'm going to put a few drops next to each color. It will be the thinner. It paints like watercolor. Casein paint is an ancient medium. What I did was add chalk to it, and I called it CSO casein tempera. The addition of the chalk creates a cement, and I can use a palette knife and apply this thickly. You let it dry, and if you wish to overpaint with oils, you do not seal it with a varnish. You just saturate it, impregnate it with the sun oil, which will pass through the paint into the chalk and create a hard, durable cement-like paint. You can use this for underpainting for oil paints. Whether you use it thinly or thickly, it doesn't matter. I'm sure that Rubens knew and used tempera paints at various stages of his painting in oils. The thin paint dries very, very fast. The thicker paint requires a little more time. In the Flemish tradition of oil painting, they used imprimaturas, which are translucent, transparent coatings of color on the white gesso. This gave an inner light to the paintings of oil on top. You can rub it in with your hand or you can use a brush. If you use a brush, you have a problem because brushes leave little bubbles, as you will see shortly. And if you see those, you're going to have to use your hand to smooth them down. So you wind up using your hand anyway.